All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to Sports Innovation Lab's Ask Me Anything series. My name is Shanna McCardle. I am the event director here at Sports Innovation Lab. We're thrilled today to have Rajan Mehta, Chief Product and Technology Officer from the WWE, joining us. I'll get into formal introductions in just a moment, but just wanted to run through a few details. For those of you who have not joined our Ask Me Anything series before, we started this basically to provide access to leaders in the industry that were taking action. And our main goal was to provide perspectives from across the industry. So from operators to players, from teams to leagues. And as you can see from our past AMA guests, we've done just that. If you have not been able to join all of our past AMAs, we have all past recordings on our website, and I'll make sure to share that link with you after I wrap up this introduction. So a couple quick things. If you've joined us before, you know you've heard this before, please join our Slack community. There is the link to join. It's very easy. You just click on that link and sign up. It's a great place to meet new people and share ideas. So highly encourage you to join us. Few quick points. As I said, this will be recorded. You will receive an email right after this with the full recording, and it will also be posted on our website. And we want to hear from you during this. So as you can see, there is a Q&A box on the right side of your screen. Please just type your question right in there. If you see a question that's already been asked that you're interested in hearing the answer to, you can click on that arrow and just upvote that question, and Josh will be sure to ask that. So now let's get into introductions. You all know Josh Walker is the president and co-founder of Sports Innovation Lab. Josh came from Forrester, where he worked as VP of Research. He currently stewards our research team and is credited with introducing the world to the concept of the fluid fan. You probably heard Josh's voice recently or seen his name, as he has been quoted in many publications and appeared on many podcasts discussing the resurgence of sports. And now to our guests. Like I said, we're thrilled to have Rajan Mehta, EVP, Chief Product and Technology Officer at WWE. Rajan is responsible for WWE's consumer technology, which includes WWE Network and WWE.com. In addition, he manages the enterprise technology strategy and operations. Prior to joining WWE, Mehta was with NBC Universal, where he held leadership roles with NBC Sports and served as the Chief Technology Officer for Dial Mobile TV. Mehta has been recognized with numerous industry awards, including a 2008 Emmy Award for Outstanding New Approaches in Sports Broadcasting for his work with NBC Olympics. And with that, I will pass it over to Josh, and welcome to Rajan.
All right, thank you, Shanna. Rajan, how did we not talk about your Emmy before this? We didn't cover that. All right, so you're a very modest guy.
It's one that I don't show too often, but apparently got in my bio. So,
but if you're like most of the athletes that we interview or speak with, they put all their trophies and everything behind us. It should be right there.
I like the picture of the Mercedes that I wish was in my garage instead of my wall.
Fair enough. Thank you for joining. But I like to start this with really just kind of a very open conversation about your role. You're smart guy. We've had a number of conversations. I think we're going to dive into a lot of really important details about media conversions and innovation across the industry, but not normal times, and certainly not normal job conditions for you. How's your life changed? How are things different? What are you spending your time doing that you normally don't do? Just kind of give our audience a sense of what your role was before this health pandemic, and then sort of now how you're sort of making your way through it.
Sure. And first, Josh, thank you and the Sports Innovation Lab for inviting me today. I've seen quite a few of these, and so I was really looking forward. So thank you guys for inviting me. In terms of the role, so my job here at WWE is twofold, right? So as the Chief Product Officer, I oversee our consumer-facing technologies and how consumers use our tools. And then I also, operate as the Chief Information or CTO for the company, and it's how our employees use technology. And with the pandemic and the switch for the remote workforce, it's been both sides, right? Of really trying to manage different aspects, and then with all everyone's personal lives also kind of being affected at the same time. Kids being home. So it's definitely been a good learning, and a lot of these things is you can plan for some things, and some things you can't plan for. It was interesting. I'll give an example, and beginning of this year, as you start seeing the lockdown that was happening in China, a lot of CIOs, start thinking through what's going to happen to their supply chain, right? And probably didn't even think about the scenario that they're going to have a remote workforce for how many months. So what happened and what happened so quickly, just affects so many people, right? And then just so that's like one thing on the enterprise side. And then if you look at the consumer side of how your technology is used, we've seen explosions and just broadly in the industry of gaming and streaming media and e-commerce. So it's it's been really interesting. And for me personally, I have 2 young daughters who quickly pivoted from going to school every day to distance learning, which got to give the town and the school systems it's a lot of work, but a lot of thought went into it in a quick period.
Yeah. And, look, I've been in this industry long enough to know that there's usually been a pretty clear separation between internal systems, IT, and product design and outward-facing media and technology that's used for that sort of direct-to-consumer engagement. So to have both of those under, your purview at this stage in life is no small task. So I admire that, and I'll just kind of pay you that compliment, and then I'll do what I promise all of our audiences, give them some headspace to think about something other than the health crisis at the moment, and let's switch gears. Love what you're doing. I've been a huge fan. We talked a little bit about this, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, the British Bulldogs, like I'm that generation. Love WWE from that traditional perspective, but as an industry observer, analyst, researcher, market intelligence firm, we've been following you guys from what you're doing on a media convergence standpoint. And it's really fascinating how well the WWE takes different formats of content, moves it around, and engages their fans where they are. Can you just kind of set the stage for how you think about reaching your consumers and maybe be a little bit braggadocious about what it is that you guys do well, because you do things differently and the results are there. You have massive social media followers, and the level of engagement on your pay-per-view products and things of that really have the admiration of other properties out there. So maybe just kind of set the stage on like what's the cultural approach to reaching the consumers and how does it make its way into your organization?
Sure. And and the one thing I'll talk about or to start off with is our content and how it's tiered, for lack of better words. And you think about the broadest distribution possible, right? And that's going to be social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and so on. And we built that social audience very thoughtfully, right? We are the number 3 brand across YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're the number 1 sports channel on YouTube, over 1 billion social media followers, right? So that base and distribution is phenomenal, right? And there was a lot of thought that went into this many years ago. Right? You started thinking through how do we integrate our production with social media, right? And if you watch any of our marquee events or pay-per-views, which were Sunday nights on the WWE Network, we tend to be worldwide trending topics on Twitter every single time. If you watch Monday Night Raw on USA, we tend to be trending topics because we've done a really good job integrating that. So you talk about this broad base of social media, and then you kind of go down, all right, how do you start tackling this ecosystem? Mm-hmm. And in the United States, we have great partners, right? We have great partners globally. In the United States, on Monday nights, we have Monday Night Raw on USA. Wednesday night, we have NXT on USA. And Friday night, we have SmackDown on Fox. And we have global distribution everywhere, right? In the UK, we have a partnership with BT Sport. In India, with Sony Live and Sony TV. So we built this broad distribution piece. So you have this content overlaying on social media. You kind of get into the pay TV ecosystem with some of our main brands and through great partnerships with media partners. And then you go down to the WWE Network, which really super serves the fan. Right? You have our tape library of over 15,000 hours of programming, and then you have new documentary style programming. We just did something called The Last Ride, which is a multi-episode documentary on The Undertaker. Did really well. And then we have marquee events like the WWE, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble that air on the network, right? So it's trying to take our content and putting it across all these different platforms in the best means possible.
And this is a great way to even just segue to our first question from Chris. We talk at the Sports Innovation Lab about the fluid fan, the idea that there's a new generation of fans that are coming out. It's not even just the age demographic that's changing; it's all of our behaviors because of technology. WWE has sort of the WWF traditional fan, right? Those kind of legacy fans that made their way into the modern era. They expect to see the storylines. They expect to see the good versus evil that we were discussing earlier. But what do you do from an analytics perspective to figure out how their behavior is changing, how you need to adapt to create new products or new content for them?
Sure. It's a great question. And you're right. There is a generational aspect to sports in general, right? One of the things we were chatting about of how I got introduced to WWE back in the 80s, where that was a family that watched sports entertainment and WWE. So that was the exposure level that I had, and you have that similar to other sports. But your question, times are very different now. There's a high volume of sports, and sports aside, there's just a high volume of content out there. So how do you get your content, your programming in different areas? And analytics is an important aspect of it. So, I was talking about that ecosystem of social media, pay TV, and WWE Network, right? But there's a broader piece as well that targets additional people. And I'll give you guys a few examples. And, and these are, things that we spend a lot of time thinking through. There's this whole audience on, let's say, Netflix, right? Netflix has done a great job with kids programming, and it's really about that next generation of fans and exposing your product to other people. Shortly after WrestleMania this year, we put a show on Netflix. It was called The Big Show Show. It's about one of our talents who's named The Big Show, and the storyline behind this was, he retired from sports entertainment, and he's now living back home with his family. So this was, if you watch the show, it's a 10-episode series on Netflix. It was consistently in the Netflix top 10 in the month of April when it came out, and it really opened it for another set of audience who may have not had the generational viewing that you were talking about. Over a year ago, we did a documentary with HBO, and it was about Andre the Giant. And that documentary was one of the most popular sports documentary on HBO, right? And you can start seeing there's different avenues and different pieces to get your content out there and expose your brand. And then you start thinking about how do you use the different platforms that are most effective, right? So one of the things I was mentioning earlier about our marquee events, our pay-per-views that air on the WWE Network. In addition to that, we have a show on YouTube which is called Watch Along, and that show is talent who are watching or the live event and talking about it, and that tailored to a different set of audience, right? It's on social platforms, so it's really thinking about how do you then take your content and exposing it in different ways, leveraging this massive ecosystem that we've never had before.
So, like I said, you guys are expert at that. So you're either expert at that because you saw something in the analytics that said, hey, we should do a Twitch Lite program where our talent can talk to the fans while this is going on. Or you're just like trying a bunch of stuff and you're like, man, this is really working. Let's do more long form documentary stuff. Which is it? Are you guys just really good at like doing a lot of rapid iterations on this stuff, or do you see something from an analytical perspective or a technology side that says, look, we're seeing greater adoption of this, shorter form is working better here? Like, what's some key insights you can give the audience on, like, yeah, our data's screaming that this is happening?
Yeah, so it's a combination of everything you just said, and I'll touch on the analytics because I think that's a really important one. If you take a look at some of the pieces that I'll use in one example. If you look at WWE and our fan base, one of the things that we saw very early on was this cross section between our fans and gaming platforms. And I'll give you an example of, and you'll see kind of where this all starts tying together. When we stream the WWE Network, we probably have a higher index of people using gaming consoles than some other OTT service, right? So that device penetration's in the house. Mm-hmm. So start thinking about that device penetration being in the house for your fans. What could you do about that, right? And so we had a talent, Xavier Woods. He's part of the New Day, and he is very passionate about gaming. And so what we ended up doing is, looking at what you were just saying, there's the analytics piece of like, there's something there, and this is back about 4 or 5 years ago, right? There's something there on this gaming side where we have an overlap with our fans and gaming. We have a talent who's really interested in this. Mm-hmm. And then we have social media platforms that can help enable this. Mm-hmm. So years ago, we started a YouTube channel called Up, Up, Down, Down. And it was really talent. This one talent playing video games. He's interviewing other people talking about gaming, and here we are. And it's a YouTube channel with 3 million or nearly 3 million subscribers, right? So things like that of looking at the analytics, giving things a try, and leveraging technology to help enable it. All that coming together is a perfect example of what you were just saying of how do we try different things and learn from it. And since then, using that as an example, that worked out really well. And then we have, the talent, the Bellas, Nikki and Brie Bella, who have a really successful show on Eve and successful with WWE. They have a YouTube channel about themselves as well. And that's nearly 3 million folks on that. So, we work really closely with our talent, looking at analytics and seeing how technology can help enable this.
And one of the main things we write a lot about in analyzing the data we collect at the Sports Innovation Lab is how well different sports properties provide access to their athletes, right? Do they allow them to get past the agents, through the locker rooms and get to talk to those athletes one-on-one and build that rapport? Now, the WWE has done that phenomenally, but that's part of the product that you guys build. NFL and others have been a little bit slower to allow that to happen because it's the collective league. It's not really the stars. And that's true in some senses, but really less and less because of social media. So one of the poll questions that I added for you guys to go in and answer is the WWE does a really good job of giving access to their talent, access to the athlete. I asked you guys to weigh in on which leagues you think do a good job of that as well. So if you get a chance to go over there and answer the question under the poll tab to the right there. Do you guys, Rajan, do anything to empower the talent? Do you give them actually products, tools, editing stuff, social media stuff to push out, or is it really, they're on their own to build their brands on those platforms?
A combination of both. I think our talent really enjoy discussions and participating with our fans in the WWE universe. We have a development center down in Orlando. Part of that development center is training the next generation of athletes in the ring and out of the ring, right? So there's a lot of mechanisms to help them. But really the talent who really want to, I'll give an example of talent, Charlotte Flair, Miss WrestleMania, superstar at WWE, many years ago came to WWE and talked about, how do we help build my brand, right? And so the team worked with her and, really build a strong social media following. And for those who follow, the WWE talent, and it's an interesting thing because there's the element of, the storyline and continuing the storyline on social media. And then there's that aspect of, Charlotte Flair, there's Ashley, what can I find out about Ashley as well? And balancing the both. It's in a world in itself, and it's fascinating.
In switching gears, because we're getting a bunch of questions now, and if you guys have any questions, make sure you ask them, and I'll keep my eye on that. In the world of professional sports, beIN, one of the OTT platforms and distributors of sports content, said that they don't consider a lot of sports media rights to be exclusive because of piracy. So one of the questions here from Matthew is, how do you guys protect your original content from piracy, digital rights management software, things that you may have made an investment in to make sure that you are protecting the stuff that people should pay for? I know that part of your philosophy is also to give a lot of stuff away. So where do you sort of draw that line, and how do you think about that architecturally as a CTO, CIO kind of responsibility?
Yeah, sure. So, it is something that we look at very actively, and we have a partnership ecosystem with a number of firms who help us out from fingerprinting and watermarking. And so you start looking at the types of content that we have, and where the protection aspects need to be, and how long you enforce certain things. So we do a pretty big piece on the technology side to help enable that. And we do have an operational element that sits on top of that and use to monitor our content and usage. And then look, there's some areas of things on YouTube where you monetize certain type of content. So if you take our asset, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, we have a certain set of rules in terms of what's monetized on social media, what are things that we need to enforce, and then we consistently take a key piece on technology.
And, I said that this is a space for us to think about something other than the pandemic, but I'm having to look at a bunch of questions here that are sort of going to touch on this. So let me ask it in a way that I think makes the most sense, which is, we see in a lot of other professional sports that the event and the calendar keeps shifting around, right? And there's going to be a million different reasons for this, whether it's regional or, case loads are increasing or whatever it is. As a CTO, CIO sort of strategy thinker, do you have to do anything with archival content to tag it differently? Are you constantly running machine learning stuff to create different types of formats for this content? Are you preparing for almost like the worst case scenario where you have to live on some historical content longer than perhaps you had anticipated earlier?
Yeah, I would say it's probably more in terms of how we go about production, and
making the new stuff.
Well, that and a couple aspects of it. One, just on the making of the new stuff. We've done a lot of precautions in terms of testing and limiting access, and we've been on the forefront of that piece to make sure we can continue on the content creation side. In terms of the libraries that we have, and kind of getting back to your question, moving the workforce from going from in office to remote, where a big portion of the people who were more day-to-day traditionally used to using editing systems, of being able to provide them access to the tools that they needed to do to create the content has been a critical aspect, right? Mm-hmm. So to answer your question very directly, it's how do you then set up the environment for people who are used to working on editing systems and graphic systems to create VOD content, whether it's for social media, or whether that's for WWE Network, and being able to do that remotely. And so that was one of those pieces of, I said there's some things you can plan for and some things you figure out really quickly. That was one of the things we figured out very quickly to enable that remote workforce.
And was that just a huge lift in terms of virtualizing the editing production room? It was like put it all in the cloud and let them get access to it from that perspective?
Yeah, well, one of the benefits is a few years ago across WWE on IT, production, digital, we really did a shift of where we could to make things to the cloud. And we did that for a number of reasons, as we saw the expansion of workforce, their scalability, access, performance. We've been building out the performance center down in Orlando, ensuring people down there had access to things in Stanford. So there was a lot of things that were already in the hopper that were moving in that way. I will say, with the pandemic and so on, and I think you'll see this on a number of areas, it accelerated a lot of the trends. So these were things that we were already moving forward on.
Mm-hmm. And Michael asks, you guys with your over-the-top services, how do you think about, and does this even touch your world on pricing or loyalty, or how do you keep growing not only retention strategies, but acquisition strategies? Have you, I don't think anybody at the WWE thinks you've tapped out on sort of your growth potential there. So what do you have to do on your side of the fence to make sure marketing is successful?
And so for WWE, the product team, the marketing team, and the content team work really closely together. So these types of ideas and suggestions we share amongst each other on a pretty regular basis, and that's one of the benefits of I feel like working at WWE is that we have that relationship of how these groups all work together. So I'll give you a perfect example. One of the things that we did recently is launch a free version of the WWE Network. So we saw that we have this great volume of content. We have live events, we have VOD. I mean, a lot of great things. So we talk about how do we expose some of that content up earlier. So before people need to give a credit card, it's limited to, hey, just give us a name and an email, right? And we'll give you access to this subset of content.
Mm-hmm.
And as people get access to the systems, they understand the content, they see what other great things that they can have by signing up. It's moving people through that funnel.
Yeah.
Right? What we've started to do quite a bit. And so I'll say one example of, we have a show called The Bump, which is like a studio call-in show, for lack of better words. It's on Wednesdays on the WWE Network. We moved that to the free version of the WWE Network. So we're experimenting with different types of content that work really well for the free version that can help move people to the paid version. So things like that go above and beyond the traditional, I would say, marketing aspects of it. It's, how do you get people content sampling to go, oh, I want more?
I love it. I love thinking funnel and the rewards that you get as you go. Is your philosophy that they get more access as they go deeper into the funnel, or is it that they're getting additional products and services? Is it both, or is there something that you're like, what's really worked well for us is we start up here, and then by the time they're here, we're selling them. One of the questions here is, what are you guys doing to monetize and sell merch? How are you using your technology to do that? Is there a big piece of this content strategy that starts to really expose merchandise at some point as either a loyalty thing or it's just an e-commerce thing?
I think all this stuff will start iterating over time. It's definitely areas that we've thought through, and I think any technologist wishes that they were 3 years ahead of where they are right now, right? Because you want to do so much, but there's the limitations of time, for lack of better words. But to kind of get what you were saying up, yeah, the content is the big driver for a lot of these pieces during the funnel. And the future state of integration of, when you look at what we have from a direct-to-consumer merchandising piece thing and a direct-to-consumer ticket sales, I can see a lot of that all tying together.
And we touched on this a little bit in the pre-call. It's also this, Twitch-like microtransaction thing where, within the viewer player or within that environment of watching a live stream, I not only get to chat and maybe watch with the talent, which it sounds like you're already starting to do, but I could perhaps, like I do with a Twitch streamer, is sort of give them donations, make some sort of currency thing happen there. Is that on your roadmap?
I would say explore a lot of different things. It's one that is always on a thing that I'm taking a look at and seeing how the industry goes.
I love that. That was my political answer. It's all fair. It's all fair. Oh man, I got to ask this question. It's my boss. Hold on. WWE has a lot of converting their Divas division to a women's division. Can you talk about your growth and success in leaning into this untapped market? My boss, Angela Ruggiero, 4-time Olympian, huge advocate for women's sports, athletes everywhere. But you guys have done a phenomenal job in building that area of your business. Is there something that was key to that success?
Yeah, I'll talk about it for those who aren't aware. A few years ago, our female superstars the division was called Divas. And I would say the perspective was that the duration that they had in matches wasn't as much as it could be. And then it became this social media piece of give divas a chance. And it trended on Twitter. And our chairman, our CEO founder, Vince, listens to, his fans. And, we've always been, I would say, forward thinking. And, he responded back, we hear you, keep watching, right? And then we did announce that we were moving the Divas division to Superstars. For all driven heavily by a great female talent of Charlotte and Sasha Banks and Bailey, and it was this big driver for us. And I will say two things on that. Last year at WrestleMania in New York, New Jersey, depending on how you want to classify where MetLife Stadium is, we had our main event for WrestleMania, which was headlined by women, right? Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, main eventing WrestleMania. If you look at social media and the top 10 of the top 15 female athletes today are from WWE.
Yeah,
and so
incredible.
It's one of it's important, and it's a piece that we've been really behind.
And just to switch gears completely radically, because we could talk about that as a whole segment. And I know that Angela is looking forward to having Stephanie on her podcast. So the opportunity here for us is to continue on this tech thing. So let's do the tech thing a little bit further on the mobile side. What's going on with mobile? David asks, what percentage of your fans are accessing your content on mobile? I'm sure you have that statistic somewhere. I'm sure it's growing, but how big of a deal is that for you?
Yeah, so mobile's obviously growing. I would say everything is kind of growing, but you got to look at what type of content that you're talking about. And this is what's an interesting piece. If you look at direct-to-consumer video on our OTT service, people will gravitate to the best screen that they have. Right? Talk to the folks at Netflix, you talk to folks at Hulu, and so on. People will gravitate towards that large screen for certain types of viewing. Then people also gravitate to.
And just to qualify, best meaning usually the largest.
Usually the largest,
okay.
Right?
Okay.
When you're watching with people, right? Mm-hmm. Lots of the individual pieces, lots of the more, a few months ago you said on the road pieces can heavily driven to mobile. So it really depends on what specific content you're talking about and where the ability starts becoming, right? So we've seen growth in mobile numbers, both Android and iOS for a content consumption, absolutely. In addition to that, the commerce aspect of what we do, you see a large, shift. If you talk to anyone about 5 years ago, people did searches online, but then when they went to go order, they switched their PC, right? That shift, of just doing the mobility aspect of it. So what you start seeing in the commerce side, you start seeing, generally, and this is probably broader just for anyone in the commerce space, smaller orders but higher frequency of orders, right? So those types of trends you see pretty often. And then you start talking about what are the other things besides video consumption and commerce consumption, right? And that's the social interaction, absolutely driven heavily on the mobile side. And we see all of that.
Yeah, they have a lot more interactivity at their fingertips if they're on mobile. Global is also an area where you guys do phenomenally well. 180 different countries, 20 different languages. Some stats like that are just kind of mind blowing to me. But we talked to one of your team members at some point, I think 2 years ago. They came by the Sports Innovation Lab, and we were talking to them about how they go around to different countries and recruit talent. So it's been a very conscious growth strategy for the WWE to do this. How does that impact the technology that you're using? Are you doing a lot of like automated translation? Do you do a lot of things that make your content more localized or personalized for that geographic region?
Yeah, and we do a lot of things on the content side. I'll touch a little bit on the technology specifically. The distribution of our content, where we are able to do this in multiple languages, has been really helpful for us. So as I'm talking about our marquee events, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, and those types of events, we actually simulcast that on our direct-to-consumer service in 8 different languages. Right? So when we started thinking through all of our touch points, how do we make this for the best availability for our audience? So one of the things that we looked at is, if we have a global audience, we should in multiple languages. So we built that functionality. Was not a minimal effort. It took a lot of thought process. How do you distribute from one place 8 different audios, sync that together, and then allow people to switch back and forth if they wanted to? And how do you tie in closed captionings to the language that you have there? How do you keep it to that specific language? So there was a lot of thought that went into to that. When we looked at just even WWE.com, which again more news and information based, we built out our website to be English, Spanish, German, and Arabic. Right? We wanted to make sure we saw a large pool of audience that had a need for additional languages, that we did that. Right? So we did look at it from an audience perspective and saying, how do we get this tied together for the best aspect of it? On the content side, we as you were saying earlier, our talent pool is pretty large from an international basis. One of the things we also did in terms of localized content, for those who aren't familiar with WWE, we have 3 large brands in the United States: Raw, NXT, and SmackDown. And NXT specifically started a few years ago as a developmental brand, but it's grown so phenomenally on its own. One of the things that we did in the UK is we developed an NXT UK. right? So we have a performance center in the UK, local talent, NXT UK, local talent, right? So it's that combination of you have content, you have great partnerships that I was talking about earlier, and how to use technology to help enable it.
So one of the things that the leagues do, or at least have experimented with, is this idea of like almost the Twitch streamer, gamer streamer sort of model, right? Where the commentator is the actual fan themselves. I can't think of anything more exciting or fascinating than to have a bunch of WWE fans talking smack and doing their own streams. And I've seen a bunch of them do this on YouTube. And I'm 46 years old, so like I'm like still watching like how crazy they get about this stuff. Do you envision creating a platform that allows them to almost in a local region provide their own, dialect, their own vernacular around this stuff?
It's an interesting piece because it's one that I've seen quite a bit as well, right? Looking at how people watch and use your content, always exploring opportunities. I'm not ready to announce one right now, but always exploring opportunities.
I love it. You're gonna run for office, man. You're good at that. When I paint you into the corner, you zig and zag. You float like a butterfly. Okay. So Stephanie asked a question that I think is super relevant around just the pandemic in general, and I sort of asked this question in the poll as well. So let's just kind of put our crystal ball on for a second and think about what's happened over the last few months. When you think about the technology innovation that's happened in sports and entertainment, do you think that there's something that's going to be lasting from an innovation perspective? And I'd like for you to, when you answer this, maybe think about where that's going to come from most, right? I asked, like, do you think it's going to happen on social? Do we think the biggest innovation is going to happen on mobile? So when you answer this, think about not only what's changing or what you think is going to be a lasting change, but maybe on what platform that change really expresses itself most strongly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of change, and what I was mentioning earlier, I think the pandemic is accelerating trends.
Mm-hmm.
Mobility and live events is one of them. If you think about the shift of attending a live event and where I think things will be just broadly in sports, WWE side, but just broadly in sports, of how do you access an event, right? The acceleration of digital tickets is quick, right? That's going to be a means for folks to take a look at, and Ticketmaster, tickets.com, access all those companies who are in the ticketing space, have built those pieces, right? But that's going to continue to be the acceleration. And then you start looking at, okay, that's how you get a ticket. What about things like parking, right? What about when you enter, right? Is there a specific gate that your ticket it should be going to, right? So is there barcodes that show on your ticket of this is the gate that you go to? When you get to an event, like any sporting event, like you think about even of like Broadway, any of those types of live events, do you have food and beverage tied to your mobile app, right? And those are companies like Legends and Centerplate that have a big portion of the ecosystem, right? And then you talk about venue merch. Right? Is it all cashless? Is it the Square and Shopify POSs, these devices? Do you do pre-orders and you have venue pickup? So all of those things were trends that were starting, but then get accelerated because of the pandemic, because you got to really think through those pieces. And so you have all of those touch points. And as I was talking, right, I obviously said a lot of different partnerships that are part of it.
You did, yeah.
That's how the system works, whether it's, NBA game or whether it's WWE match or whether it's boxing. There's a lot of different pieces. So it's that relationship with the consumer, right? The event you're going, where you're going, and who's enabling it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That piece is going to be a change. Again, matter of when, and that tie to mobility is going to be the big driver for this, right? I mean, if you look at a few years ago, 15, 20 years ago, security entrances to sporting events have quite a bit changed, right? There's companies now that are looking at other aspects of how to do that. So there's lots of different things that are, going to be a bigger change. I think a lot of the other pieces that you were talking about of, Twitch and broadband consumption, those are going to continue to grow, and we've seen that trend. But this is probably where I think the biggest change happens.
So it's very interesting that you went right to the live event, right? The live entertainment, because that's an area we've been focused on as a company for as long as we started the business, actually. We call it the smart venue. We've seen the innovation, not only of the convergence of all those different categories you just mentioned, and it's not trivial, right? You touched on everything from access control to concessions to hospitality and all the rest of it. And we've got tons of clients in that space. Clear is trying to make it easy for you to do facial identity. Armored Things is trying to make it easy for you to do crowd intelligence and know where people are clustering. We've got Legends who's thinking about like how we do this stuff and make things contactless. And there's all this, work even on the mobile side, right? The Venutizes of the world and the apps that actually tell you where to go and what to buy, and even loading your wallet. It's all there. And I summarize that all because I'm like, not only is it there, but like the biggest innovation we're seeing is it's not just about the venue, but it's everything around it, right? So now I might have a WWE experience pop-up store, I might have Top Golf in the same arena, or I might have a bunch of bars. And how much do you have to worry about sort of partner integration for these mixed use retail environments versus just the stadium as again, from the technology perspective, not the marketing perspective?
Yeah, I think the technology will help enable the seamless experience, because right now what's happened is that I think you have a lot of different great experiences, right? But they're all individual. And I think where, my mind has gone, and what you were kind of getting at, is how do you help enable all this, right, so that the WWE fan or the NBA fan or whatever it may be really can kind of make it simple, right? Because that's been the big
I always wonder who's going to take the general contractor role, right? You've got all your subcontractors. We just named a bunch of them, but
sure,
has the authority and sort of the gravitas to say, hey, you guys figure this out. Like, I need you to work together, because the consumer doesn't care if it's Uber that dropped you off and, Ticketmaster who collects your ticket and, Rover who's got your web thing. Like, I want to know, like, that this is all something that our customers are going to have no problem understanding.
It's a good question.
Is it WWE? Does WWE come in and give them the smackdown and say, hey, make this thing come together?
I think it's a good question, and I think the unfortunate answer is there's not a easy answer for this, right? Because when you start, you can start going into this, and it's where the complexity comes in. You'll take a venue who has an NBA deal, an NHL deal, and then has sporting events and WWE and so on. So it's unfortunately not a one size fits all, because if it was, everyone would have done it already, right?
Yeah, no, they have many different masters to serve in that relationship. Understood. Okay, so we're getting close to the top of the hour here. I just wanted to touch on one last thing that I think is super important, just generally from your perspective, which is, how do you guys hire? Like, we're going to enter into an environment where there's going to be a lot of talent in the marketplace. When you think about, we've outlined a strategy for our clients to create a fluid fan studio. And the studio brings together all these different parts of an organization that have to do some of the things that you guys have started to do really, I think, intuitively. And when we reached out to you and we said, we need you to join the AMA, it was really with this fluid fan studio in mind. It's the convergence of broadcast with digital and social and the live entertainment experience. No group really does that well by bringing together, hey, we know exactly what song to play and what lighting to do, and we know exactly how to keep the conversation going, and we know exactly how to, stream this at scale. Like, those are very different skill sets, and people usually don't sit in the same room and try to figure out what that fan experience is like. Very long setup for a very simple question, which is, like, when you think about what you need to do next, where do you look for that talent, and what do you think your organization needs most?
Yeah, I'll answer that in two ways here. So one is the talent pool. It's kind of like this two-way street, right? Like, you want to make sure your talent knows all the great stuff that they can do working for WWE, right? So part of my job is to make sure folks are aware of it. Going to the Drupal conferences if we're looking for a Drupal developer, right? And really going to the streaming media conferences, going to the IT conferences, right? Those types of things of being part of the ecosystem is one of those things that I specifically am working on. Obviously, right now it's a little challenging to do that. So there's other means to take and look at that. So that's one aspect of, how do you find the talent pool? The second piece of really understanding where these talent pools are is really helpful. It's a global talent pool, right? We have, for my team specifically, people who are working with us in Latin America. We have people who are working with us in Europe, and people who are working with us in Asia. And so, in order to help drive that, you need to have strong partnerships with people on the ground, right? So it's a twofold answer, specifically on the technology side. And then to your question of what are some of the key areas, just being in this space, technology and data are big ones for me specifically. I think there is a limited talent pool on some areas. In demand jobs, very competitive. So those are areas that are really important. Being a content company, content creation, and getting really talented people in those areas is really helpful. So a lot of different avenues, different opportunities, and then the means to get them is it takes time, but it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking through.
All right, this is my last question, and I'm going to bake in a compliment, and then we'll wrap up here because this has been fantastic. Chris asks, how do you guys test out innovative tech? How do you test it? Because, and this is his compliment as well, which is because you guys tend to be first to market in a lot of really interesting things. And so I want to thank you for joining. I want to appreciate the time you've spent with us today. But maybe you could answer this question and then also add anything that you'd like to, because again, we like to give our guests the last word here. So how do you test tech? Why are you guys always first to market and so freaking smart? And then you can wrap up with anything you'd like to add at the end. Sure.
So in testing tech, we do a few different things. We built out a technology which was really helpful for me, which we called our VOC, our voice of customer. And it's social listening. We want to know what people want to see. We have a fan council, which we talk to them. What are things that work well? What doesn't work well? When we have early prototypes, we show it to our fans. We show it to our subscribers. We get feedback on, oh, it'd work better if you did this, this, and this, right? So that type of aspect has been really helpful for us from a product perspective. It's allowed us to also understand what's really important to people. One of the things that we saw, going to the WWE Network, and it's going to sound obvious, but being a video service, content discovery was one of the most important things, right? And how do people find things quickly? How well does search work? What are the things that we can do to make that better? And then the second thing was, okay, content discovery was great, but your structure, like how do you organize this, right? And a lot of that came through just discussions with people and how they're using the service. And so we did spend a lot of time there and early prototypes and using some technology to get some rapid feedback from people. So that's been the philosophy from a product roadmap perspective. And we take that and kind of looking at all the other areas of what we're doing and on the consumer side of technology, of what we can learn and how do we get things out there quickly. Voice of the customer, fan council, listening directly from your fans, and anything else you want to add before we wrap up? No, well, thank you guys for inviting me. This was great. Really enjoyed it. Love the conversation, and thank you guys. You guys have done a great job with these Ask Me Anything panels. I really like it. Well, appreciate your time. And for all of you that I didn't get to your questions, we've harassed and invited and will continue to get the WWE team on our Slack channel. So you guys can join us there and continue the conversation. And hopefully, if they can't answer your question, someone from the Sports Innovation Lab team will. But thank you guys all for joining us today. And Rajan, thank you. Stay safe and really appreciate your time. Thank you. All right. Be well. Bye, everybody.